Hey everybody, this is Grace. It's been a while since I've made a video on this topic. I think I have one that I haven't even listened to from last month. But I want to give a little update on the story. These stories are basically about people who are toxic people. You know, some would say they have narcissistic behaviors, histrionic behaviors. I see it as a blend of those and others. And the things that they do wrong, okay? And in this one, I do want to explain a little bit about, the groups. Okay, now the Paige is one that she works as a volunteer. She's an older woman. Well, she's my age, 57, I think, yeah. And she works with, does the volunteers and works with other women around her age. And some a little younger, some a little older, and they do volunteer work. Basically putting together care packages, and it's volunteer, so it's they don't get paid. And then they have a variety of women and doing it. So, and then they also have a shift in the morning that men usually do. For the more heavier stuff, women can do it too. And but it's mainly men with the heavier stuff, and then they do it like afternoon, noon, around lunchtime, and then the other, the younger group, they come in after, like say 4 or 5. Anyway, the character Paige, she is a good one. She's an empath. There are other ones in the group that there's a lot of women, and they're just more like histrionic. Their behaviors are more like histrionic. Like there's a mean girl, Donna, and her flying monkeys and their wannabes and the ones that just get reeled into their BS, that kind of thing. But now I need to explain more about Paige because various reasons. But anyway, Paige is a member of a group that their children, adults now, name them as the original members group. How, yeah, very plain. But they call themselves the 2.0s. And then the next generation, iGem Mems. So, anyway, it's kind of funny. But now the original members, they just call themselves by their names, or they could say another member, something like that. And but Paige is one of them, and Paige is one of the ones that has been with the group the longest. And she and Derek, they were the first two that people really put a lot of trust in. They saw more like, these when it goes back like say 40 years, maybe not even 40 years, 35, and people, they were some of them were still teenagers, and many of them were like in their 20s, and they still had that thing of prom queen. You get what I'm saying? That kind of mentality, and that was them, Paige and Derek. And but they started off as a group of computer gurus. You could say back in the time whenever it was not common. People, I know, I did this. People had to connect, like through what was it called? Telnet, and their computer to another person's computer. I'm not talking about in somebody's house. I'm talking about one house to another house. Another city, another wherever. And then there were things like bulletin board services or BBSs. Some call it something else, BB, I don't know. Things like that. And, I've been through so many, I can't even remember them. All of the different ways people connected back then. Yeah. At least since 1990. And there was something before, there were things before then, because I used something similar to email back in the early 1980s. So I had my first computer in 1982. Anyway, So these were people who were into computers when people didn't like it. Believe it or not, outsiders they did not like them. They call them like as if it was a dirty four-letter word, geek. Okay, it was thought of as bad, and really it was. And I know I was one of them. And yeah, it was so long ago. That was so gone through so many things, and now it's like the most popular thing, and some people use it for the wrong reasons, and that is not what I think any of us thought that it would become. None of us went through all that so it could become what it is today. How so much evil can be seen. Just pure evil, really. But anyway, so Paige is a member of this group. She's one of the main ones, and over all these years, they basically were so close, hundreds of people to start off with. They became so close that they started helping one another out, helping one another get jobs in the field, and then they basically over time became wealthy. They also, Paige and Derek run it. Paige is more of, when one of them needs to get contact, needs to contact them, her group, she's way up there. She is the leader, and the people that work for her, or help anybody who needs to get in contact, and other services. They deal more with like the money and Derek's basically, if they need some help, part of it is just part of what she does. Is if they need help, they contact her service, and then they contact Derek or his service, and if they will contact the ones that are called the enforcement. That's anything from lawyers to bouncers, even bodyguards, private eyes, security, whatever. And that's run by Jim. And Paige is more like people who are part of the members and the 2.0s and their children, if they're adults. They pay a monthly fee, monthly due, but if they don't, they can't, they just don't. And they can pick up later on, but it helps them because they have so much things like all this, help with through the enforcement. They have, they help one another find jobs. They help one another start businesses. They help one another to build houses, to buy land. And it's all in, this part is in one county, but it's all over. They start off in one county in Texas, and they just kind of, found other people from other states, other, places in Texas, and it just grew over all these years, and they're very wealthy. And the people who pay, pay the dues, you can pay it like a year, whatever. It's very cheap, like $10 a month, whatever you can afford. But they're generally all rich because they get what they call, I'm doing air quotes here, dividend checks, okay, from all these businesses. People, it's a group thing. Of course, the people who actually own the businesses get bigger, get more. But, every little penny in all these businesses and all these things going on that they're doing, the projects, everything is a lot, okay? And it's not just in that one county. So it adds up, So, okay. And like I said, it's a big, it started off in a county. And these are people who lived in the county, Derek and Paige, and then all these other people who lived in the county had, I don't know, a certain amount of towns. They weren't cities, they were towns. And they started off with generations ago, many, many years ago, that some wealthy people in Texas bought out a whole area, many acres in Texas, and over time it became a county. And what they started off with, sending like 4 families, sending their one of their children and that child's spouse, as an adult. And so 4 of them did that with 4 groups of helpers, things like ranch hands and their wives and people to do, help with the cleaning, cooking, kids, whatever. And they sent those 4 to kind of settle it. They're called the settlers. And the other ones were the founders. And basically they had bought all these acres, and they were very wealthy people. And many, many acres that became eventually, could have more than, as it is, around 10 or so towns within it. And these weren't big towns. They're not real small towns either, but towns. Anyway, so they moved into the west side. Okay, this, you start off on the west side, and it just grew over the, generations and generations. But in it, anybody who is, they send in, after they sent them in to, to get settled, started off, they send in more and more of their family members and more of their family members. And it was a diverse group. It wasn't one ethnic group. It was not, they had some who were, various different classes. I guess I should say. I don't like the word classes, but different people. Okay, diverse. And but anybody who, as the time went by, all these generations, anybody who was related, through the bloodline to the original settlers, all of them, the original ones, this diverse, very diverse group, they were the only ones able to buy and or own land and property there, businesses. They owned the property. It was theirs. Anybody who married them, they could not, they could try, but they didn't, to sue to get it in divorce or something, but it wouldn't work. And ironclad prenuptials and stuff like that. And so at some point, the people who were the original members, developed, and they became so important to the, call them the elders, that were of the, the groups that, not groups, but the people, the elders, became so important to them because of their computer savvy. And they really helped them with a lot of things that they were having to do manually, like keep, ensure that people weren't marrying people who were at one point come from the same family, same bloodline, you see, so they computerized everything, and not just that, just everything, keeping track of the houses, the homes, the generations, the everything, the money, and all, helped them to, with that they decided, that they wanted, the members, they wanted other people that they knew in other part of Texas or other states, other countries. By that point, they wanted them to move in, to be able to move there, but they couldn't buy property because it was only, the person who was from the original settlers, descendants from the original settlers. So what they did was they opened up the southern part of the county that was just acres of trees, woods. So they opened up parts of that and allowed them to move in, and they were called the outsiders. Yeah, the outsiders. These names, there wasn't something of a childish thing. It was something like start off as more of a joke, like the outlaws, where they were as part of the original ones that settled a different area of north and northeast, and basically the people in the north, they sent their people who were doing wrong, people who needed to go to jail, they sent them to this other area, and that developed, they developed jails, but they also had brothels and bars, way back then, kind of thing, and that became known eventually as more of a joke, they call it the outlaws. That's where the outlaws go. And it just became something like, they didn't change it, they didn't want to correct it, it became that. And they kind of wear it with pride. You know how some people are so rebellious, they wear that with pride, that kind of thing. Anyway, I think we all know that that's not a good thing. But, for somebody to be labeled but at the same time, that when they own it, when they decide, I'm owning this, it's mine, that's a different story. You know? Yeah. They may have been calling it out of some way, but when they own it, and they say, like I just said, they say it's theirs, and they have a sense of pride about it, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to get eventually to this point about Paige. Okay, I've mentioned all this about the enforcement, the outlaws, the outsiders, the originals, the 2.0s, and I don't think I've ever done that. But a big part of it is the enforcement. Okay, all the lawyers, they also, Jim's group, they also train, train bodyguards, train people for police, anything that has to do with law enforcement. Lawyers, they send them to school, to university, to law school, whatever. And it's a big, lots of money, and they're really good at it, and their services are wanted worldwide kind of thing, or nationwide. And but they also have something that is for if any member, of the original group, or any of them from anybody that's there, that's in that county, they, and maybe some even outside of it, but they have like safe houses, and they have shelters and so forth. Okay, I come out here, and of course I'm going to start coughing, allergies. But anyway, they, like if some member runs into some kind of trouble, they're in another state or they're in another country, wherever they are, and even within the state, and they, because I have a story that is, I've already done the PowerPoint months ago in July, but, gets into some trouble, or family member gets into some trouble, like, a spouse who's abusive, and they need to run away from spouse, because like they have women's shelters and they have men's shelters, and they like I said, safe houses. It's not a witness protection program kind of thing, but something like that. It's not somebody who's a person who witness, but they have a bunch of them. Okay, and the enforcement, they guard the people, they go out and they get the people, and rescue the people, these kinds of things. And within the county, they have their kind of like own sense of, punishment. If somebody does something, unless it's something like murder, but something that they don't have to be, they could be jailed, but they don't have to be. They have a system like that to help them get on the right track, instead of putting it on their records. They kind of do it, their own way, and it's not evil. These are good people, by the way. These are good, like a good versus evil. The outsiders, not the outsiders, but the outlaws, they tend to be a little on the evil side, but they tolerate them. They're in the same county. They try to work with them. Not all of them, of course, are bad. But anyway, I'm trying to put all this out there because there is something that is, it's going on. I've already written some of it, like I said. And Paige, this one that I've been focusing on, Paige is going to be, well, she is in it now, and she's going to have to stop doing the volunteer. She's going to be, it's going to be her, well, I don't want to tell the story because there's a story there, but she basically has to start calling some of the members, the old members, the original members. That have moved on. Some of them have left the county. They live in the big city. They live, somewhere else. But she and her group, her employees, they have to start calling them home, kind of thing, for a reason, for a purpose, and that's where that's going. But these things, and I also need to talk about the elders more. They basically run the show. The county, not so much. The sheriff, not so much. Everybody knows the score because everybody whose bloodline, part of the bloodline, whichever one, and their descendants, their children, their grandchildren, all of them, they get these monthly, like I said, they just call them dividend checks. All that are adults. And nobody wants to lose that because they have such connections with everything. Do you see that? That is a leaf. I was like, what the crap? But there it goes. But they don't want to lose that money. And it's not just about the money. It's there's so much that's so helpful to them to live there. They know what the outside world's like, outside their bubble. And it's worse. It's not, within their own county, and it's a big county. All of these 10, 11, 10 plus. It's growing, in other words. Some haven't become towns yet. But within those, within there, except for like the outlaws kind of area, things aren't as harsh. Things aren't really harsh. Now, they have their troubles because they'll marry people from the outside and people who they didn't realize were just trying to get their money, just had heard about the place and they wanted to get in, and they, of course, tried to sue and they couldn't and all that. They have that kind of thing. The elders are basically the ones who run the show. Everybody, people have to come to the elders, who's anybody 70 years old and older that wants to be, and they live in this really... That's going to be interesting to explain, but these houses, and it's like kind of like one would think, well, I'll explain later, but they run the show. People have to come through them, and they deserved it because they've lived through it and they know the score, and they're old enough to know what really needs to be done. They're not out of touch. So many people think that once you get to a certain age, you're out of touch. No, you're not. Plain and simple. No, you're not. You might not be in touch with every, thing that you find online, on Twitter or whatever, because that's your interest. But you might be out of touch with their interest. So it works both ways. But anyway, I'm going to get to that. I wanted to do this one. Like I said, I haven't even listened to the one that I made that... I know it was really bad. I remember that. The way I did it, it wasn't flowing, but there are other videos around that. We'll see. Okay, I'll talk to you on another video.